The sky cracked open with fire as starships clashed above the palace world of Oraxes. The Galactic Empress stood on her balcony, her golden armor catching the light of burning ships. Her people shouted in fear across the cities below. The royal guard ran through the marble halls, but even they could not stop what was coming. The enemy had not only arrived, they were winning. Empress Valera was known across the stars as the strongest ruler in the sector. She commanded 10 systems, 20 fleets, and the loyalty of 100 alien species. But all her power meant nothing. Now her admirals had failed, her generals had died. Her most trusted commander had betrayed her, opening the gates to the rebel fleet. The war was already lost before she lifted her sword. Inside the royal chambers, a secret chamber held something precious. It was not treasure. It was not a weapon. It was a man, young human, and dressed in rags. His hands were calloused, his eyes tired, but his gaze held something defiant. His name was Kale. He had been a slave for years. No one remembered when he arrived or why the Empress kept him alive. Only that she visited him, alone, when no one watched. Kale had been captured on a remote colony. They said humans were weak, emotional, and unfit for galactic rule. But Valera had seen something strange in him. He didn't beg. He didn't lie. He spoke to her like she was just another soul, not an empress. And once, just once, she had smiled back. Now her palace was under siege. Her advisors had fled. The royal chamber shook as blasts from orbit broke through the planetary shields. She had one last path escape. But instead of running to the warship waiting on the east landing pad, she ran to the slave chamber hidden beneath the palace. Kale looked up as the steel door opened with a hiss. Dust fell from the ceiling. She entered in full armor, a blade in one hand, a tear on her cheek. He didn't ask questions. He just stood. His chains were gone. She had released him weeks ago, yet he never tried to run. He had nowhere to go. Now she had nothing left either. "I need you," she said softly. The words sounded strange, like they didn't belong in her mouth. "Not as a servant, as someone who sees me. As someone who tells me when I'm wrong." Kale studied her face lit by firelight through the broken walls. "You're losing," he said, "and now you're scared. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you real." She stepped closer, metal fingers brushing against his wrist. For the first time in her life, she had no one left to impress, no empire to control. Only one man who had never bowed, yet never hated her either. Outside, the rebels landed drop ships in the gardens. The trees burned. Statues shattered. The last line of guards fell at the gates. But inside the hidden chamber, 2 figures stood in silence. Not ruler and slave. Just 2 people watching their world collapse. Valera asked him, "If I leave now, I become a ghost. If I fight, I die. What would you do?" Kale didn't flinch. He looked at her eyes, not her crown. "I'd stop trying to be perfect. And I'd start being someone worth following." The walls cracked above them. The floor shuddered. Her people were dying. Her crown meant nothing. But the way Kale looked at her, it gave her something no army ever had. A reason to stand again. She nodded. Then, with her free hand, she passed him a weapon. Not a slave's tool, a warrior's blade. "Then fight beside me," she said. "Not for a throne. For something better." The halls of the great palace were burning. Flames crawled along golden pillars and shattered crystal walls. Kale followed the Empress through smoke and falling stone. She moved with armor clashing, blade tight in her hand. But something had changed in her walk. She was no longer walking as a ruler. She was walking beside him. They passed the bodies of her once loyal guards. Some were old friends. Some had trained with her since childhood. Now their eyes were empty, staring at a sky filled with falling ships. Her jaw tightened. She didn't cry. Not yet. But her hand trembled when she gripped her sword tighter. Kale kept close. His steps were careful. He had no armor, only the blade she gave him. But he moved like a soldier, not a slave. He didn't need orders. He watched her back. And she noticed. They entered the throne chamber. The high ceiling had been cracked open by a blast. Rubble covered the silver floor. The throne itself stood untouched, high and empty. Valera stopped and stared at it. She had sat there for years. Judged others from that seat. But now it looked like a grave. Kale looked around. They'll come here next. You should go. Now. I will not run, she said. Then you'll die here. She turned to him. Then I die standing. But not alone. They heard boots. Dozens, marching. The rebels had breached the inner gate. Their banners flew over the walls now. Her empire had truly fallen. And leading them was someone she had once trusted more than family, General Korvax. Korvax stepped into the chamber with a line of black-armored soldiers. His face showed no guilt, only cold pride. I warned you, Valera. The galaxy needs change. You clung to a dying order. She didn't raise her sword. You betrayed everything we built. I freed it, Korvax said. Then he noticed Kale standing beside her. He laughed. And now the mighty Empress hides behind a slave. Valera stepped forward. No, I stand beside him because he sees me. Not the crown, not the throne, me. Korvax waved a hand. End this. The soldiers raised their weapons, but Kale moved first. His blade flashed, cutting through the first man before he could fire. Valera followed, a roar ripping from her lungs. Steel met steel. The throne room turned to chaos. Kale fought like a wild flame. Fast, quiet, deadly. He wasn't trained like the others, but he had something more pure instinct. He moved to protect her, block every strike, cover every blind side. She fought beside him, graceful and brutal, like a falling star. Together, they were more than warriors. They were a force. Korvax's soldiers fell. One by one, their numbers didn't matter. Their skill didn't matter. Kale and Valera fought with something the rebels had lost: conviction. Blood covered the floor. Smoke hung in the air. Finally, Korvax stepped forward himself, drawing his twin blades. You can't stop the change, he said. This galaxy belongs to those who take it. Valera raised her sword. No, it belongs to those who protect it. The clash echoed across the chamber. Sparks flew. Korvax was strong, fast, ruthless. But Valera had something he didn't. She had a reason to fight. A reason beyond power. And Kale stood behind her, cutting down anyone who tried to strike from behind. Korvax's blade nicked her cheek. She didn't flinch. She drove her sword through his side. He gasped, fell to his knees, and looked up at her with disbelief. You were always too soft. No, she whispered. I just forgot what strength really meant. Korvax fell. The chamber grew quiet. The remaining soldiers dropped their weapons. None dared move. The Empress stood bloody, tired and breathless, but alive. And at her side, the human slave, now her equal. Valera turned to Kale. You could have run. You didn't. He shrugged. Didn't want to, she smiled. Just a little. The first real one in years. You gave me that. A reason to smile again. Kale nodded. Then smile more. The galaxy hasn't seen that yet. They didn't speak for a moment. The battle was won, but the war had only begun. The empire was broken. The people scattered. The rebels still held the sky. But something had returned. Not a throne. Not fear. Hope. Valera reached out and touched his arm. Stay with me. Not as a servant, as someone who reminds me who I am. I was never yours to command, Kale said. I know, she whispered. That's why I trust you. Outside, fires burned. But inside the throne room, the Empress and the former slave stood side by side. Their roles shattered, their futures uncertain. But one thing was clear, the galaxy would never be the same. Again. The smoke cleared slowly from the throne chamber. The once great banners now lay in ash. Soldiers gathered around the doorway, unsure if they were witnessing the fall of a queen or the rise of something new. Kale cleaned his blade on the cloak of a fallen rebel. Valera stood beside him, her chest rising with each heavy breath. She had never felt so tired. Not even during her hardest battles. This exhaustion was different. It wasn't from the fight. It was from letting go of who she used to be. The Empress who ruled from fear was gone. The woman who remained now looked toward rebuilding, not with threats, but with truth. Outside, rebel commanders were already pulling back. News of Korvax's death spread fast. His army had no cause left, no leader to follow. Some surrendered. Others fled into the frozen wilds of Oraxes. The battle was ending, but the silence afterward felt heavier than the war. Valera walked slowly to the ruined throne. She didn't sit on it. She stood behind it, resting her fingers on the broken edges. She looked down at the stained floor. This place isn't mine anymore, she said. It never truly was. Kale watched her from across the hall. He didn't speak. He knew she wasn't asking for answers. She was only now hearing the truth her heart had buried for years. That ruling from fear was never real power. That smiles were harder to earn than obedience. I don't need a crown, she said. I need something real, something worth building again. Kale nodded. Then let's start somewhere else. This place has ghosts. Valera gave him a long look. Then she turned and walked past the throne. She didn't even glance back. Gather those who remain, she ordered. Not the nobles. The workers. The ones who never had a voice. The survivors came out of hiding slowly. Former servants, young cadets, palace workers. Even some rebels who had thrown down their weapons. They all looked to Valera with the same question in their eyes. Were they now prisoners? Or did something change? Valera stood before them, her armor stained and her voice calm. The empire you knew is gone. I don't want it back. I want to build something better. No more thrones. No more slaves. Only people. With the right to choose who they follow. The hall stayed quiet. Then someone clapped. Another joined. Soon the entire group stood clapping, cheering, crying. They weren't following orders. They were choosing her. Not as an empress, but as a leader who had bled beside them. Later that night, they camped in the lower ruins. The power systems were down, the heat barely working, but it was safe. Kale sat near a broken fire core, sharpening his blade. Valera joined him with a ration pack in hand. She tossed him one. Still tastes like metal, she said. He smirked. Better than starving. She sat beside him. Her armor was off now. She wore simple gear, same as the others. No crown. Number. Gold. Only a soft cloth around her shoulders and a scarf covering her scarred neck. For the first time, she looked like a person, not a statue. They ate in silence for a while. Around them, people repaired equipment, tended wounds, and shared stories. No one asked for her command. They simply respected her presence. She had earned their eyes with action, not fear. Valera looked up at the stars. Do you think we can really rebuild it all? Kale chewed quietly. Not the same way, but something new. Something honest. She turned to him. Would you stay? Help lead them? I'm not a leader, he replied. You led me, she said. Kale set down his blade. I'm just someone who tells the truth when it hurts. Someone who doesn't pretend. Then that's exactly what I need, she said. For a long moment, they sat watching the sky. The stars above were cold and sharp, but somehow they didn't feel distant anymore. Not when she was no longer reaching for them alone. Later, she stood and walked to a small group drawing plans in the dirt. New shelter routes, supply scavenging, possible rebel hideouts. Kale watched her crouch and point with calm words and simple gestures. She didn't order. She offered ideas. And they listened. She was no longer an empress. She was something stronger. A woman reborn in fire, standing with her people instead of above them. And at her side, a human slave who had taught her the value of her own voice. Asterisk, the days that followed were quiet, but never still. Valera worked among her people, never asking for special treatment. She helped carry supplies, organized watches, and listened more than she spoke. Her golden armor was gone, replaced with worn travel gear. The only thing that still marked her past was the way others looked at her, not with fear, but with hope. They watched her rebuild with her hands. She didn't command them from a tower, she stood beside them. When someone was injured, she helped. When someone questioned a choice, she explained without anger. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Kale remained close, though he never acted. Like her second in command, he didn't need a title. He gave ideas during meetings, broke up arguments before they grew violent, and kept a steady hand when others felt lost. Most people still called him the slave, but not out of insult. It was a reminder of who he was and what he had become. One evening, Valera stood on a rocky ridge overlooking the wreckage of a rebel dropship. Its black steel hull was torn open, still smoking from impact. Kale stood beside her. The cold wind tugged at their cloaks as they watched the flames flicker in silence. We held the valley, she said. But they'll come again. Kale nodded. They always do. She turned to him. We need allies. Systems that haven't chosen sides. Colonies that just want peace. Kale folded his arms. You think they'll trust you after everything the Empire did? No, she said softly. But maybe they'll trust me if they see who I've become. The next morning, Valera gathered a small team, mechanics, scouts, and medics. She would leave the camp under the care of a former palace steward, while she and Kale traveled west to an old trading port. It had once served as a neutral ground before the war. If anyone still held influence there, they might listen. The journey took 3 days. Across snow-covered cliffs, broken bridges, and abandoned towns. Along the way, they passed wrecks from past battles. Drones shattered on the ground, rebel flags buried in snow. The scars of war were fresh and deep. They reached the port on the fourth morning. It was quiet but not dead. Smoke curled from chimneys. Guards stood watch with old rifles. When they approached, the sentries raised their weapons. Then they saw her. Recognition flashed across their faces, followed by confusion. I come in peace, Valera said, raising her hands. No armies. No threats, just help, the guards whispered among themselves. One disappeared into the inner gate. Minutes passed. Kale stood ready beside her, hand near his belt, but not drawn. Valera didn't speak. She just waited, letting her posture show patience, not weakness. Finally, a tall woman in gray robes stepped forward. Her face was lined with age, her eyes sharp with memory. You're the Empress, she said, or were. I was, Valera answered. Now I'm only a leader without a throne, looking to rebuild from what we all lost. The woman studied her. Then her eyes shifted to Kale. And him? He is the one who reminded me what it means to lead, Valera replied. They were allowed inside. The port had power, food, even working comes. It wasn't grand, but it was functioning. A council of elders controlled the area now, and they were not quick to welcome outsiders. But they listened when Valera spoke. She didn't promise glory. She promised trade, safety, fair treatment. A new alliance built on shared survival. Kale spoke only once during the meeting. A younger elder had accused Valera of using them again, just like the Empire once did. Kale stood and said, "She gave up her crown, fought beside us, bled beside us. If you think that means nothing, then you weren't paying attention." The room fell silent after that. And slowly, heads began to nod. By nightfall, the port agreed to limited support. Food shipments. Shared repair crews. A promise to remain open to future talks. It wasn't victory, but it was a beginning. And that was all they needed. That evening, Valera and Kale walked along the port's edge. The stars above were bright, untouched by the smoke of war. She stopped and leaned against a steel railing. "I never thought I'd stand here like this," she said, asking for help, being heard. Kale stood beside her, quiet as usual. Then he spoke. "You're not who you were, and they can feel that." She turned her eyes toward him. "And what about you? Who are you now?" He smiled faintly, still figuring that out. "But for now, I'm someone who believes in you." Valera looked at him for a long time. Her heart beat slower now. Not from fear, from something else. A warmth she hadn't allowed herself in years. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not giving up on me when I didn't even believe in myself." Spring came late to the mountain. Snow still covered the peaks, but green patches began to show between the stones. Life pushed through the cracks. The camp had changed too. It wasn't a camp anymore. It had become a village. One built by many. Hands from many species, with one shared goal. Valera stood on a high platform built from old ship parts. Below her, children played near a half-built school. Farmers tested soil near a greenhouse. Traders unloaded crates filled with seeds, tools, and books. No guards stood at the gates. There were no walls. Only trust. She walked through the market square with Kale beside her. His hair had grown out. A scar ran along his left arm now, a gift from one of their last raids against the final raider bands. But he moved easily, confident and calm. The people nodded as they passed. Not because of fear, but because of respect. A woman from Vareth handed Valera a warm loaf of bread. A young boy from the port shouted her name and waved from a balcony. An old rebel offered her a carved symbol of peace. Each gift was small, but each one mattered. They were no longer symbols of power. They were signs of belonging. Kale stopped. By the edge of a wide field where construction had started on a new assembly hall. "Remember when this was all rubble?" he asked. "I remember thinking it would never rise again," she said. "But it did." "Yes," she said, "because they believed in each other. Not just in me," he looked at her. "And because you gave them a reason to believe." That night, they sat around the fire with a group of workers. They passed warm food and shared stories of old battles and strange victories. Valera laughed more now, not because she forced it, because the sound came freely, like it belonged to her again. A scout came forward during the meal. She handed Valera a datapad. "We found something. In the eastern caves, an old relay station, still working." Valera raised an eyebrow. "Does it reach the outer systems?" "Yes," the scout said. "We think it can." Valera stood and walked to the edge of the camp where the stars glittered above like shattered glass. She held the pad tightly. A working relay meant contact, messages, maybe even distant survivors who had given up hope. She could speak to the galaxy again. Kale joined her. You going to use it? I should. But do you want to? She nodded slowly. This time I want to use my voice for the right reasons. He looked at her face. Then tell them the truth. She smiled. That an empress fell. And a woman stood up in her place. She recorded her message that night. No crown, no titles. Just her words. She told the truth about the fall, the rebuilding, the pain, and the hope. She invited the forgotten, the broken, the wandering, to come not to serve, but to join. Not to rebuild an empire, but to build a future. The message echoed across space. Some ignored it, some doubted it. But others heard. Old outposts blinked to life. Small ships began to land near the valley. Families stepped out with tired eyes and carried old dreams. And each one was welcomed without question. Valera no longer led with fear. She didn't demand loyalty. She inspired it. Her army was made of farmers, builders, healers, and protectors. Her capital was a field of hope. Her throne was the earth beneath her boots. Kale remained at her side, not as a servant, not as a warrior, but as a partner. The one who reminded her who she was when the galaxy tried to erase her name. The one who never asked for power, but always offered strength. One evening, as the stars shined clearly above, Valera and Kale stood beneath the lights of the new relay tower. Its beacon pulsed quietly, a sign that someone somewhere was always listening. She took his hand without a word. He didn't pull away. She had once ruled 1,000 worlds, but felt alone. Now she ruled nothing, but felt full, and in the silence of that moment, the Galactic Empress finally understood what it meant to smile.